Michael Shelley, welcome to the Physical Performance Show, Australian Podiatry Association audience. This is our first live physical performance show. We're up to 340 of weekly shows, so it's taken a little while for you and I to sit down.
Yeah, it's making me very nervous right now because it's live, so we'll see how we go.
No room for error. Mike, we theme the featured performer episodes, which is where we glean from athletes' journeys and stories and their lessons along the way. We theme it the highs, lows and learnings. But before we explore the highs of your remarkable career, 3 Commonwealth Games, marathon medals, 2 Olympic representations, I think I counted up this morning circa 13 or 15 Australian team representations over the years. Let's just go back to where it started, a young Michael Shelley. How did you first discover the sport of running, and when did you realise that you were very gifted?
It started off as I used to play soccer, but initially I wanted to play rugby league, but my parents wouldn't allow me to because I was very skinny. As you can still see, I'm actually quite skinny. And the risk of injuring myself was quite high because I'd broken my arm 3 times before I was 5. So that whole thing, my parents didn't want me to play that contact sports because they were worried that I would injure myself again. So I was able to play soccer after having sort of a bit of a clearance and that sort of thing from doctors from an operation I was born with the diaphragmatic hernia. So I wasn't allowed. That was probably another reason why my parents didn't want me to play contact sports. But yeah, so I got into soccer and started playing soccer for 6 years. Really enjoyed it, the whole team atmosphere of it, and but also enjoyed the fitness side of soccer. So a couple of times my coach at the time would say, if you can lap them, the other guys have to do another lap. So I would try and just challenge myself to get that extra lap in. But then once I got to about that 14 into high school, the opportunities come up to participate in more inter-school sports. And because I come from a primary school that had 100 students from grade 1 to 7, so we had soccer or netball in our sort of opportunities for sport at school. So soccer during that sort of time frame. But once I got to high school, I had more opportunities. So the opportunity to come up to participate in cross country and really enjoyed it. And then the opportunity to have for a coach. My high school coach was a big sort of learning step. He was involved with athletics and just sort of said, well, come down and we can do some training sessions. So some of the early mornings that my dad would drop me off at school, and then I'd go do a training session, and sort of by the end of that day, I'd start to fade out. So my English lessons, which were at the back end of the day, wasn't quite awake for in some of those times. But generally, I just sort of set myself goals through with that coach, just to try and make a stage through representation for the school. And then by the end of high school, I was very fortunate enough to make an Australian, just after making an Australian team, going to World Juniors not long after that.
I mean, there must have been something in the water at your school, Helensvale School, because Sally Pearson, Nee McClellan, other way around, Olympic champion, hurdler, was also at the school. Yeah,
it was a very sort of, during that time we had a few sort of really high, like Samantha Stoser as well, went to the same school, as well as Michael Osborne, Lindsay Clark, Rory Thompson. So in 2014 they actually named houses after us, like our last name. So that was a very, it was a major honour for that sort of recognition through our school. So it was quite humbling at the same time. It's like I didn't really sort of expect that, but now the school's got over 2,000 students, and it's quite big, a lot different to what it was when I was there, that's for sure.
And then Michael, from the early days on the Gold Coast, where you made your first representative team for the track and field World Junior Champs in Jamaica, you then went to the AIS on scholarship under the tutelage of distance running Australian royalty and legend Dick Telford. How many years were you there for, and what were the big highlights have been around that environment as a young runner?
Yeah, that opportunity came up just after as I was sort of just coming to the end of high school, just before World Juniors. My coach Brett Green was just getting some information as to how I could improve. So just about training sessions and that sort of thing. And he was able to get in contact with Dick. and sort of had some conversations of just about how I was going leading up to World Juniors, that sort of thing. And I wanted to get down there actually before World Juniors to have a little bit of a training camp with some of the elite guys, because he had quite a good group going down there at the time. But we decided to sort of end up staying on the Gold Coast before World Juniors because it was in Jamaica. It was going to be quite hot, so Canberra was quite cold at the time. So that was sort of what was led to staying on the Gold Coast. But then once I got back from World Juniors, that opportunity came up. The scholarship came up for the institute. So my coach sat down and said, "Look, I think it's the best opportunity for you to go to Canberra, train with some guys that are going to be older than you, that are going to be able to push you," because I was training by myself up here on the coast. So with his blessing, I sort of took up the opportunity and spent a great 2 years down in Canberra, met some great people and amazing friends and that sort of thing through running in Canberra. And especially sort of coming 1920, it was just a great time to be in Canberra, and learning from Dick as well, because he's got such great knowledge and helped me achieve a lot more than what I sort of ever thought I would. But with 2.5 years I spent in Canberra, but then sort of once I got injured, which sort of basically brought me home back to Queensland, because I had osteitis pubis and a sacral stress fracture, which weren't great. So it was about a 12-month sort of period where I wasn't enjoying the whole running environment, or whole running scene in that regard. So basically it was great to get away from it. So come home, catch up with friends, family from school and that sort of thing, which is really sort of re-energised me, I guess, in that regard. And because it's not that sort of intense environment where it's just sport. So it was just great to get away, and that helped me, I think, just refocus, and started then towards running more on road races, and then ended up going to the marathon a few years after that.
Was that your first significant injury at that point? The osteitis pubis,
that was
pain, and then the sacral stress injury?
That was, that was the sort of the hardest sort of, I think it was one of those, as we'll talk about before, like a load sort of thing, because it was basically in the mid-season, that pre-season of training, started to do a little bit more heavier weight. I think that's when I sort of started to, just under fatigue. I think that's probably what contributed to getting some of those injuries. But at the same time, it's things you learn along the way, and it's just a whole learning process, everything that you do, and you sort of reevaluate, some of the exercises and that sort of thing that you're doing, and make sure you don't repeat the mistakes in that regard. So that was, it was a great learning experience. And then just to change up and go to a different event once I come back from injury was another way to just reinvigorate yourself, I guess.
And you went to the marathon. 2010, you ran your debut in Rotterdam in 2:13:05, and then not long after, you're on the start line for the Delhi Commonwealth Games, where you ran through the field with a really well-paced run to pick up the silver medal. And at that point, that was your marathon PB. Glasgow, it was Glasgow, wasn't it? So this
Glasgow,
is Delhi.
Delhi.
Delhi, you ran through the field to pick up the silver. I think 2:15.
Yeah,
you ran that day.
Yeah, it was quite conservative, because in my debut marathon, the last 3 to 4 kilometres, I really struggled, and it was one of those hitting the wall sort of moments that you're just trying as hard as you can, but you're just going, and you think you're going at sort of 3-minute 10 pace, but you're running like 4 to 5 minutes sort of pace, and just basically your legs are just not moving as well as you would like. But then you sit down, you evaluate it, and you go, well, if I can just get that right, maybe I just need to be a bit more conservative. And as Delhi was a hot marathon, it was basically, talking to Dick, we sort of thought, well, if we run a little bit slower early on, just be conservative and make sure you're able to finish off strong. That'd be a great experience as your first Commonwealth Games and international marathon. And to see how you go. And I'm fortunate enough that did occur, and I was lucky enough to come away with the silver medal.
I watched that footage this morning, and you ran past, at that point, the flail in. He was going backwards East African, and you went into that silver medal position, and you were still young in years at that point for a marathoner.
Absolutely, it was my second marathon. I just, at that stage, I was like, I didn't know, because I got to that 40-kilometre mark. I was like, okay, just be cautious, be careful, and make sure you finish. it was just, it was one of those moments that you look back on and go, okay, that's, it's a special moment. And it's one thing that I tried to look at every race as a different experience, and that's what because each condition is going to be different as well. So that was my sort of focus on after that for each race.
And then from there, we're missing many races, of course, in here, your London Marathon, some of your world majors, where you were a top 10 or...
I think the one in London was one around 2:11:40, I think, or 38, I think, was the third one, which that at the time was a qualifier for the London Olympics, which is, I was over the moon that I could even think, 2 years before, I wouldn't even think about running a marathon at that stage, and then to be able to then qualify to run the Olympic marathon was quite special, and the hard work to get back just sort of made it all worth it. And obviously the support from family, friends, and everyone back home just made it that extra special.
And you ran a very well-paced race. I remember watching the London Olympic Marathon, and you ran through the field. You started very, conservative and ran through into 36th position. No, that was 16th. Sorry, 16th, and then that's a big difference. So 16th. Sorry, you had a 6 in it.
The halfway mark, I think I was 61st or something like that, and I was around 2. It was quite an even race. I think I ran 1 hour 7:02, I think, or 5 or something like that for the first half, and then 2 seconds slower in the second half, and I ran up sort of 35 spots or something like that, which was it just shows the back end of the race was sort of that really important section, but I paced it as well as I possibly could have, I guess, in that regard, that it was so even, which I didn't know at the time until I finished and actually saw the results. I was like, actually, it was quite consistent the whole way, which is surprising, because I was starting to get, the face was starting to all tense up and really hurt, that sort of thing, that's for sure.
Well, man, it's reassuring for us mere mortals that it hurts.
Yeah, it does hurt.
Even the elite.
It does hurt. It doesn't matter how. It's all in the same relative. It does hurt.
I mean, pacing seems to be a hallmark of your marathon success. So you went from the silver medal at the Delhi Commonwealth Games to Glasgow, where you ran through. You finished with the Commonwealth Games title, the Commonwealth Games marathon champion, in your PB, 2:11:30, 2:11:15.
Yep.
Which that race remained your PB until the end of your professional racing career.
That was the PB. It was just that one day that just everything come together, and you just felt really sort of it just clicked. You don't get those days too often, and I think the back end of that race, it really clicked. I was starting to look around to see if there was people that was going. I was nervous that I was going to run into a hole at about that 37, 38k, because the marathon previous, the exact same thing happened as what happened in my first race. So I was a bit nervous that it was going to happen all over again, because my hands start to tingle and that's up my arms. I'm like, oh no, something's going to go wrong. But it was fortunate enough that I was probably hydrated enough, and that may have been the issue in previous ones, that it actually, it went to plan better than sort of ever could imagine.
And Commonwealth Games champion, at what age were you at that stage?
29, I think.
Yeah. And we'll go to the Gold Coast shortly, where you defended your Commonwealth Games title. Obviously, there was the Rio Olympics in the gap. But just to put us in the perspective of what a typical training week was looking like through these marathon preparations, obviously there's periodisation through your year, but what was an average workload, hours?
Yeah.
Everyone understands the language of kilometres. We know it doesn't pick up intensity, but put us in there.
So in terms of, a typical training week was generally my long run was a Sunday. Sort of 2.5 hours, depending on up to sort of about that 40 kilometres sort of mark. And then so the next day would be necessarily easy as just to make a couple of runs, and then sort of session Tuesday, depending on 1 kilometre reps or 2 kilometre reps or something like that. Another easy day on the Wednesday, and then sort of Thursday become a bit harder, a bit longer. So once again, mileage depending on sort of up to 25 kilometres, whatever. My coach Dick Telford wanted me to do that day, an easier day on the Saturday or Friday, and then another hard Saturday, and then back into the long run. So that was the hardest day, was generally the weekend, but then made sure either end of those days was quite easy. The biggest week I ever did was, I think, 220 kilometres, I think. which, there's a lot of sleeping involved in between runs, that's for sure. But it was just made sure the next day it actually was, I recovered. That was probably the most important thing. There was days in there that, I'd just turn up to training, I can get through this, I'll be fine, but just couldn't complete it. And then you get down on yourself, you get angry, have a chat to the coach and just leave it there and live there. And then the next session you're generally okay because you cut your session short, so you recovered enough, because then Thursday you come out and you go, well, where was that Tuesday? And you're like, you don't know. It's just days were like that, and it's something I had to learn towards the end of, even towards the end of my career, I still got frustrated that I couldn't do a session one day, but could do it 2 or 3 days later, and it was fine. But it was just wasn't recovered enough when I thought I had, which then comes down to diet and that sort of thing, which, probably not the best or ideal diets that I had throughout as an elite athlete, but hey, you got to enjoy some things, don't you?
It's interesting though you say that. With such high energy output as professional runner, endurance runner, marathon, the caloric demand's so high. I think it's a matter of the calories, no matter how you get them in, is almost more important than the distribution of what you're actually eating to get those calories. Yep. I know you mentioned you were quite fond of lots of different foods that Mars bars were a staple. Mars bars?
And soft drink, and I know a lot of dietitians just get this shakes when I actually talk about what I used to eat, but it was enough to fuel me. So generally a bottle of soft drink a night or a day. Plus, maybe a bag of lollies in there as well, or a packet of chips, depending. Sundays were always great because I'd do my long run in the morning, and then I would recover by eating packets of chips and soft drink and pizza for dinner on Sunday night. But it was good times, but as I say, there wasn't much going out on the weekend though, because I was always tired, having to back up for the next day of training. But you have to reward yourself, and that was the way I rewarded myself, was by having the odd more than often cheat day or whatever.
You said something interesting, Mike. Even towards the latter part of your career, you were still getting frustrated when you couldn't lay down the session that was maybe on paper from your coach, Dick Telford. I heard an Australian triathlon coach recently say, hard is what you're good for that day. Yet it seems to be something that athletes, wherever they sit on the continuum, they struggle with, is that making peace with the fact that some days you just don't have it.
Yeah. And you by the end of, I did start to go, you know what, it's what I had. It's you can't do anything about that. You just got to move on. It's just in the moment you get so caught up with, it has to be perfect. It has to be perfect. But some days it doesn't work, and you just got to accept that. And as I sort of learned, it's the best I could do on the day, and you got to be happy with that. You can't always, be running PBs. That's the one thing I ran. When I finished my career, I had 5 times that I'd run 2:11, 38 to 15. So within, I think it was 5. Yeah, 5 times. And I didn't have one outlier or anything like that, which is great that I could be so consistent, but I always like to run that little bit faster, being so close so many times to that PB. 20 seconds, for over 42 kilometres, just 1 second a kilometre quicker, and you run a PB. It's just frustrating, but it's the best I could do, and I'm at peace with it, and that's the way it is. It's just the best I could do.
Can't do any more than that. Mike, through this, we know that you weren't using a dietitian, as you just said, but what other allied health services were you? Was there a team?
I tried.
Was there a team around you that you would tap into? Obviously, Dick Telford, your coach, very well resourced with his knowledge and.
Yeah, I used to use a chiropractic rig, so that's probably a bit controversial.
That's fine.
I'd see my chiropractor most weeks. Just to make sure. So for me, the way I because with osteitis and all that, I thought it may have been a bit more imbalanced, that sort of thing, athlete going to its head. So I started using that chiropractor to make sure I'm in alignment. So I'm not over-favouring one side more than the other. That's what I, try to reason with myself. And for me, to be honest, I felt that worked for me. I didn't have that many major injuries, which I'm very thankful for. Probably the biggest one was the osteitis and the sacral stress fracture, and that was before I started running marathons. And in that sort of marathon career, I had sort of a stress reaction in one shin. That was about it, and I had a Achilles issue. And they were about the major issues, I think, in that sort of time period, which some years I was running 8,000 kilometres.
Wow.
So to be able to have not the injury issues, I'm very thankful for, and that's, for me it works, and that's like everyone else, like some things work for some people and others don't work for others. So for me that worked for me, and yeah, it's I'm very thankful for Kyra to help me in that situation.
And the Mars bars.
Absolutely. And the soft drink and the chips.
Mike,
McDonald's and the KFC.
I think that was, I remember McDonald's sponsored one of the junior triathletes, and I thought that was an interesting move when I was a junior.
Right.
Mike, you defended your Commonwealth Games title here on the Gold Coast home soil in 2018 for the road marathon. It was a hot day. It started at 8:55, which for the Southerners is not a big deal, but up here it gets pretty warm by that time. At that time of the year. Once again, you were pacing your race to Mike Shelley's standards, which is very little errors there, and you defended the title. The race was mixed with some degree of controversy, with the Scotsman Callum Hawkins succumbing to heat illness at 40 k's just as he was going over the Sundale Bridge. You ran through, got the gold medal, well-paced, executed race. How have you processed? I recall at the time, and knowing you on the Gold Coast, and for the better part of 2 decades, the criticism that was being thrown unfairly, no one could argue with that, about that race, people that maybe didn't understand the sport or just wanted to voice their opinion. How did you process some of the call it what it is, the criticism that came your way for some reason not stopping to help a heat-stricken competitor? It was a very, very difficult time, I must say. In the race situation, when I was coming up to, I didn't know what had happened in that regard, and I saw the medical assistant with Callum. So from my understanding, he was being looked after by the medical person, and that's why I continued on. And then once I finished, I did see what had happened, and that was it was not the greatest look, and I understand that. My family and friends were very supportive of me, and for me, in that instance, I reached out to Callum that night and wished him all the best and hope he was okay, and he responded and that sort of thing. So we had a conversation about that. And yeah, it happened unfortunately the way it did, and I'm grateful to see him back running again now, which he has run really well since then. He's a couple of fourths at he's fourth at World Championships in Doha, which is a fantastic result. And I think he's had a little bit of an injury recently, but I'd still keep watching out to see how he's going, and it's great to see he's coming back from. I think he's had a little bit of an injury recently, so. It's great to see him coming back, running well again, and I wish him all the very best for what's coming in the ahead. So hopefully he gets back to what he was doing, the sub-60 half marathons and that sort of thing that he was running. So watch out, and I'm fully supportive of how he's travelling, and want to see him succeed. I mean, it's such great sportsmanship, sportspersonship. You wrapped up your professional career after defending your Commonwealth Games title here on the coast. How did you know it was time? Was it a hard decision?
At the time, it was just in 2019, so it was basically just after 2018. I was having some issues in terms of just in terms of my rep training. I didn't know, I was having some reflux issues, and didn't know when it was happening, when it was going to happen in a session, when it wasn't going to happen. So I was having a little bit of an issue with that, and just wasn't getting fit enough or what I felt that I needed to get to fitness-wise to actually get to the start line and run hopefully that little bit of a faster time. So I missed the first part of the season, which is generally that sort of April or March, April, May sort of time for marathons. So I tried to, just reset and focus on something at the back end of the year. It was still happening. I did go have a look to try and see some issues that it may have been. It may have been a breathing issue, so that was may have been causing that reflux. I tried some of the techniques, so it just really wasn't working in that regard. So I turned up to training one day and I was going to do a session at the track, and it just took me longer than, I think it was over an hour and a half warming up, and it shouldn't take you an hour and a half to warm up. And I just went home and I just started to chat to my parents and said, I think I'm done. I just didn't want to do that hard session. I don't think it's time for me to continue on, and had a chat to my coach and Dick, and he said, well, have a think about it. Just keep jogging and keeping yourself fit. Just see how you go. It may be just a moment in time that you just want a bit of a break, or you just want something to be easier. And so I took 6 weeks. Still training, and just kept it to myself and the parents and Dick, and I rang him about that 6 week mark. I went, it hasn't changed that motivation to kick on to try and get that PB. So basically it was time. Have I got any regrets? Not really, in terms of I don't think so. Like you watch the event and that sort of thing, and I'm at peace with it. I love watching it, that sort of thing. But I know the training that I needed to get done, and I know I just wasn't up to getting to that level to be where I was and want to be. So it was just time to finish it. I've happily helped out a few people recently in terms of with some racing, that sort of thing. So I helped Lisa in a 30k of Gold Coast Marathon, which was fun to do because we've had such a great training relationship over the years. So I just thought, well, if I can give back to her after she's usually been at the drink stations of some of the marathons at Olympics and that sort of thing. So and then another friend, I've been helping her out with some training. I ran City to Surf with her to help her just to get to that little PB that she wanted. So I just enjoyed it, made it a little bit more fun and not as on the serious side that I once did, and be sort of that strict, focused athlete. I'll have a Macca's burger the day before or something like I can, like a normal person these days. So I'm enjoying that side of the fitness side of it. So I'm still run most days. I did 10k this morning, which is just fun. So I've run up to 30k, but I don't do the hard sessions like I once did. It just body doesn't like it used to.
The intensity work, Mike. So looking back, you from the outside looking in, you seem to have adjusted very well to life post professional sport, which we all can identify can be such a transition for elite athletes. What would you rate as your fondest memory or race recollection?
Ooh.
Is there one that stands above all others?
I don't think you can classify one, because I think there's so many moments in each event, each race. So for Commonwealth Games, it was one of my first sort of national multi-sport teams. So in Delhi to win a silver medal was just out of the blue, and just like, how good is this? This is fantastic. I love marathon running. It's awesome. So then running one of the world marathon majors at London, the London Marathon, to running over Story Bridge, or Tower Bridge, sorry, is just phenomenal because the streets are empty. I ran down in New York. There's a lot of experiences going to the Olympics. I never thought it was possible just to be able to sit down and say, you've been to an Olympics, and it's just in awe. You just eyes wide open. You just don't believe what you see. Sitting in a dining hall and you see the big NBA stars walk past, and you're like, and you're just flabbergasted. Like, you're just people that you see on the TV that have achieved so much. You're able to sort of see them walk past, and it's an awesome experience. So there's not one moment, I don't think, that sort of really stands out in that regard. But just being on teams with some wonderful people. thankful for that opportunity. So I was on a world cross country team with Lee Troop, Steve Monaghetti. When Benita won in Belgium, like Craig Mottram was on that team as well. Like there's just a lot of Australian great runners that I've been on team with and I've met, and so grateful to have that opportunity. That's the main thing probably that I'd take away from it, I guess.
The memories, Mike. We're going to launch into a performance round. You've already run 10K this morning, but you can chalk this up as a second session. These are the rapid fire questions.
Oh no, these aren't good.
To glean a little bit of insight from your journey, training session most disliked?
Mile reps.
How many?
I was just, mile reps. Just mile reps.
Training session most loved?
Long run.
Favourite pre-race meal?
Spaghetti bolognese.
Bedtime?
What time or?
Yeah.
When I was tired.
Morning time?
In summer, early. It would be like 4:30 for a long run or a session day. 4:30, 5 o'clock, but yeah. If winter come and I had the opportunity to stay a little bit longer, I would.
Who's the athlete Mike Shelley most admires and why?
There's numerous that I've sort of seen. I sort of at school was watching Sally Pearson, which was actually doing hurdle drills in our ESP class that we had, and I was sitting on the high jump mats knowing that I had a training session to do that afternoon when I could have actually done it then. So that's, seeing the professionalism. In terms of like some of the, being able to sit down and have breakfast with Haile Gebrselassie was quite special as well. Like I admire him, just what he did in terms of the marathon when he was running these world records, that sort of thing. Kipchoge's, that's impressive. I've met him, just shook his hand, which is quite an honour in that regard. But there's so many athletes that you'll gain inspiration from. So even from athletes like Lisa Waitman works a full-time job and still is running now and at a high level. So there's so many athletes out there who've got their own stories and have that, inspire you along the way, that's for sure.
Toughest competitor you ever raced? Who was that and why?
There's Australian or?
Can be international.
Anyone that's, everyone's going to run hard to win. I think every athlete's going to be hard. Everyone's going to be a tough athlete. So you just got to go out there, do your best. And as I said before, the best is what you can do on that day. And you've got to be happy with that performance.
Is there a mantra that you'd consistently use in training or racing, Mike?
Not particularly. It's just like keep working harder. I think that was basically the one thing that I just kept on telling myself, keep going, keep going. That's the one I can sort of just think of ahead. That's probably the thing that I sort of kept on pushing. But sometimes if I was sort of not in a race and it wasn't going well, think of training spots or reps that I could then go back to keep pushing myself, to keep motivating myself. Or that's generally what I tried to use in a race situation, that's for sure.
Best recovery tip?
Leave your shoes in a hotel after a marathon because then you don't think about it and you recover properly. I used to take about 3 weeks post-marathon to start running again.
Yeah, wow. That's interesting. 3 weeks before you'd have your first run back.
Yep.
Wow.
I'd go travel. Just do something completely non-running related.
Gosh, there's a lot of wisdom in that, I'm sure. One word to describe your racing style?
I don't know, probably angry face. That was what one of my friends used to... Because whenever I used to sort of finish, I was like... it wasn't that often that I'd have a smile on my face finishing.
That's the exertion. How would you describe Mike Ben in the zone?
It depends. I'd always listen to the same music playlist. That was one thing that one of my sort of things that I used to do. I don't know, probably angry. I don't know.
When was the last time you were in the zone? Com Games?
No, probably last race, which was last serious race that I ran, I think was Glasgow half marathon in 2018, I think. Yeah, it was hurting, that was for sure. So I had angry face on. You just, I don't know, just focused.
And who was on that playlist?
It's something that I had, that I started to listen to when I was like in 19 at the AIS, one of the first CDs that one of my friends sort of just had it CD. I just kept on listening. It's like R&B, so it's early 90s R&B sort of thing.
So now, whatever works, right?
I only used to listen to it when I actually competed, so that was kept on fresh every time. So, so I didn't compete that often. So so that was another thing.
You're always getting the vibes, Mike. Final session of the performance round. We know that epic sessions don't make champions, but can you recall one session that was the hardest session in your career that really stands out?
Oh, it's probably going to be. It's not probably what you'd expect, but 400s on a long recovery. It was when I was running 1500s on the track. It was horrible because of the lactic acid just build up, and because you're running as hard as you can for 400, and then you have 5 minutes rest, and you had to do it 4 times. It was horrible.
And what were your splits?
Oh, I think they were like back in the day. I think it was like 53 or 54 seconds. I think they were. It was horrible. I hated it.
Mike, you're out of the performance round. Well done. Every guest of the show always gets asked 2 set questions. The first is, if you could boil everything you've learnt through your sporting career into one piece of advice to help listeners of the show and our live audience today perform at their physical best, whatever that looks like, what would Mike Shelley's sole piece of advice be?
It's a tough one. Probably just focus or run your race. That would be probably my sort of best piece of advice, because know what you have done in training. Just focus on because everyone's going to be coming from different levels, but just focus on what your controllables, because that's going to be your best result. I think that would be my sort of run your own race in that regard. That would be my sort of best piece of advice if I can. Run your own race.
A little extension off that. What would be your top tip for the marathoners or the aspiring marathoners?
Have a go, because I never thought I'd actually run a marathon in my early years. I was sort of looking at the time. I was running track. I was doing track before I got injured, that sort of thing. But I was looking at them doing 2.5 hour long runs. I was like, no thanks. But ended up running quite a few. So to be honest, I just have a go, enjoy it, because the next time you'll probably run another one. After you run your first one, you'll probably run another one, because after my first one finished, I was like, geez, I feel really ordinary, but like within 3 hours, I was like, I want to try and better what I did previously.
There's they should come with a warning. They are addictive. Mike, final set question, and that is the physical challenge for the week. So every guest of the show, featured performer, expert edition, or otherwise, lays down a physical challenge for the week ahead. What's Mike Shelley's physical challenge going to be?
It's definitely not flexibility, that's for sure. I think at least run 3 30-minute runs. Just get out the door, and it just helps. I don't know, just if you have any sort of, if it just mentally refreshes you, that's the biggest thing. You just go for a 30-minute run in your local park, that sort of thing, just to mentally refresh yourself, even just during the week, so it gets rid of some of the stress that you can incur during your week, that sort of thing. Or even do your local park run, meet new people. That's probably the best piece of advice I could give you in that regard.
Park run, what a great institution it's become, from the first park run in Australia here on the Gold Coast to
all around Australia and all around the world, absolutely. So it's a great concept, and it's awesome to see people out there just having a go, enjoying just being able to exercise, especially in the parks, that sort of thing.
Michael Shelley, thank you for stopping by the Physical Performance Show and the live audience here at the Australian Podiatry Conference.
No worries. Thank you for having me today, guys.